tonight.
My administration will be focused on three very important words: jobs, jobs, jobs.
President-elect Donald Trump means business when it comes to fixing America's economy. Newt Gingrich is here with reaction.
I'm here to help you folks do well.
Then the president-elect meets with the tech industry leaders to talk jobs and innovation. Anthony Scaramucci and Austin Goolsbee weigh in.
We're going to cut your taxes, and we're going to have strong borders, and we're going to have the wall.
And President-elect Trump makes promises to you, the American people. So how does he plan on keeping them? Trump's new senior advisor on policy, Stephen Miller, is here. All of that, plus actor Kevin Sorbo and his wife Sam. They're here to talk about a brand new movie that I am the executive producer of. We'll announce it tonight.
We could literally cover each country, each section of the world, and get that message out.
That's awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hannity starts right here, right now.
Hey, welcome to Hannity. And President-elect Donald Trump is already working hard to fix the American economy, and that is tonight's opening monologue. All right, so President-elect Trump, he won't take the oath of office till January 20th, but that is not stopping him from trying to clean up the economic mess that President Obama, of course, is leaving behind. Earlier today, the president-elect, he met with tech industry leaders to discuss job creation and innovation. And before today's roundtable discussion, well, the CEO of IBM, who attended the meeting, announced that her company is now going to create 25,000 new jobs right here in America, and they will invest over $1 billion over the next 4 years. Now, President-elect Trump also promised you, the American people, that he's going to focus on job growth, and that's what he's trying to do right now. Now, last week, Trump announced that Japan's SoftBank, they'll invest $50 billion into America's economy. That will create 50,000 new jobs. And remember, last month, Trump cut a deal with the manufacturer Carrier to save over 1,000 jobs that the company was planning to ship to Mexico. All of this, no doubt, a positive, a great start. But the truth is this: the president-elect has a lot of work cut out for him. Now, President Obama's policies, I've been telling you, a complete and utter disaster. Here's where Donald Trump is starting. The lowest labor participation rate since the 1970s, 95 million of your fellow Americans out of the labor force, the worst recovery since the 40s, the lowest home ownership rate in America in 51 years, 13 million more Americans on food stamps in the last 8 years, 43 million Americans living in poverty, 8 million more than 8 years ago. 1 in 5 American families, imagine this, without one person in the labor force. 1 in 6 American men, 18 to 34, they're either in jail, incarcerated, or living in mommy and daddy's basement because they don't have a job. And by the time he leaves office, well, the president will have accumulated more debt than 43 other presidents before him combined. Now, there are very clear reasons why President Obama failed. What did he do? He tried to use big government, statism, to create jobs, which has never worked. Now, remember his failed stimulus plan? He was going to create, quote, shovel-ready jobs. Then he joked they weren't so shovel-ready. Those jobs never materialized, and it cost you, the American taxpayers, nearly $1 trillion, over $800 billion. Now, here's why it failed, and we need to learn these lessons. All those billions of dollars, they were filtered through that big, bloated government bureaucracy in Washington. And remember, then it went to their friends and companies like Solyndra. It was destined to fail from day one. These results have been pathetic, and all we have to show for it is doubling the national debt and stealing from our kids. Now, Obama's plan didn't work. So the question we've got to ask tonight, before Donald Trump becomes president, what will work? How do we create success for what I call this election, the forgotten man, the forgotten woman election? Now, President-elect Trump's plans, it's a stark contrast to President Obama's. He's going to take the opposite approach. He will implement policies that historically have worked. Now, here's the president-elect's economic plan. He wants to create jobs in America. How's he going to do it? Lower taxes, reform the tax code, 7 brackets to 3, a 15% corporate tax rate, a 10% repatriation rate for the trillions of dollars that multinational corporations have parked abroad in banks. He's going to cut, in a huge way, government regulation. He wants to renegotiate trade deals, Energy independence, so important for national security and job creation. Repealing and replacing Obamacare, that should end up like a tax cut for most Americans. And he has a goal of 4% GDP growth. Obama did not have 1 year of 3% GDP growth, the only president in history never to have 1 year of 3% GDP. Now, if President-elect Trump, if he follows through on that agenda, it could create one of the biggest economic boons, I argue, the country has ever seen, and history, I think, proves. Now, it would be very similar to what Presidents John F. Kennedy and Ronald Reagan did. They understood that in order to have real economic growth, you need to unleash the potential of the free market capitalism. Go back to JFK. He set in motion a plan to cut the top marginal tax rate from 91%. He dropped it to 77%. Now, during his short time as president, 3.8 million jobs were created while seeing an average of 4.4% GDP growth. Ronald Reagan, he took over for Jimmy Carter. Remember, it was a bad economy then. He took the concept further. He shredded the top marginal rate, lowering it over the course of his presidency from 70% to 28%. As a result, Reagan in 8 years created 20 million new jobs after the 82 recession ended. GDP growth averaged 3.5%. Government revenues nearly doubled. They spiked by 65%. We saw at the end of his presidency the longest period of peacetime economic growth. These lessons are so important. President-elect Trump has one major advantage over JFK and Ronald Reagan. We know that we can become energy independent. We have massive natural gas, shale oil reserves, and not only will tapping into those resources create millions of jobs here at home, but it will also create a whole new foreign policy dynamic in the Middle East. We won't be dependent on countries that hate our guts. And if we export some of those resources to Western Europe, well, they won't be dependent on Putin and Russia for their energy needs. Now, the only part of the president-elect's agenda that I worry about is the infrastructure plan. Now, he's talking about $1 trillion in spending. Everybody agrees we've got to fix our crumbling roads and bridges. That's obvious. But how are we going to pay for it? How can we plan? Do we pay as we go? And the money, by the way, cannot be spent. Somehow we got to get it out of the hands of congressmen and senators, 535 greedy bureaucrats in Washington that will misappropriate that money. Now, finally, there has to be an outside commission, some entity, someplace, somewhere that oversees how this $1 trillion is spent. There needs to be accountability. Joining us now with reaction, author of the best-selling book Treason. He has a new e-book out about the election of Donald Trump. He gave a speech on Trumpism today at the Heritage Foundation. Former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. How are you? Good to see you in the studio.
Great to be with you. It's fun to be up here.
It's great to have you. Look, the reason I'm laying this out, JFK worked. Reagan worked. And the reason I want you here is what you balanced the budget. Yeah. Nobody thought it was possible at the time.
Well, and we created tremendous economic growth, had the biggest capital gains tax cut in history, had the biggest improvement in children living in poverty in history. Because if you really get the economy moving, it really helps across the board. I'm very optimistic because I'm watching President-elect Trump assemble a cabinet that is amazing. These are all winners. These are all successful people. I think it may have the fewest lawyers of any cabinet in history.
And the most generals?
And the most generals and the most successful business people. It goes back to sort of Eisenhower's cabinet in the 50s. And the reason I like that is when this team arrives in Washington and they collide with the realities of Washington, this is going to be a meeting of winners. The team of rivals was the story about Lincoln. This is team of winners. And you're right. I mean, you have a four-star general, Jim Mattis, going back to the Defense Department. You have a four-star general, John Kelly, going to head up Homeland Security. You've got a three-star General Flynn at National Security. But you've also got really successful business people. And you have the longest-serving governor in the history of Texas, who's going to take on the energy challenge you just outlined.
They picked the perfect person, Rick Perry.
Rick is going to be he's going to drive energy in America. And that's one of the ways we pay for infrastructure.
Well, the way the Washington Post describes it, and you said you bash the idiots in the propaganda media, she described this election as a bunch of ignoramuses, billionaires, and a few generals. Well,
Right.
is there something wrong with becoming a successful billionaire like Bill Gates? Is there anything wrong with that?
Well, but if you're on the left, there is. I mean, on the left, you want a cabinet of losers. So you can feel sorry for them. I mean, you know, the whole concept, for example, of having a Super Bowl where you have the winning team of the whole season.
Not everybody gets a trophy.
As opposed to, you know, if the left had their way, everybody get a ring. I mean,
Yeah.
Did you suit up? Did you care?
Right, did you care? Maybe we have to mail her crayons and coloring books and Play-Doh.
I thought, I can never remember her name because I blocked
Jennifer
her.
Rubin. Yeah.
Jennifer Rubin. I actually was quoting Nassim Taleb's article on intellectual yet idiots, which is, it's IYI. You can Google it. The audience can Google intellectual yet idiot. And his term of idiot fits her perfect. Jennifer Rubin is the perfect example of what he's writing about, which is a person who can write well and sounds like they know something, but doesn't know anything.
I call them overeducated idiots.
Yeah.
They really are.
I mean, think about the notion this woman sits at the Post.
By the way,
having achieved,
National Review, Wall Street Journal, Weekly Standard, they have their share of them.
They do. And it's because they sit around and they render judgment. I first learned about this from the guy who wrote Black Hawk Down, who had written a book on the Philadelphia Eagles. But because he wasn't a sports writer, they all accepted him and talked to him because they were intrigued with what he was writing. Right. He said what he learned is, if you're a pro football player, and you got some 50-year-old guy up there who can't run 20 yards, and he's describing his judgment of your touchdown pass. It's just, you just get angry at the whole idea of who does he think he is?
Yeah.
And that's what she was like. Here's a person, Jennifer Rubin, and I am picking on her directly because she's the pseudo-conservative who masquerades.
Listen, you could add NRO. You could add Bill Kristol. You could add any of these
the
guys.
idea that she would describe a cabinet which includes a world-class pediatric neurosurgeon, it includes a remarkably successful Secretary of the Treasury. It includes a remarkably successful Secretary of Commerce. It includes, as I said, the longest-serving governor in the history of Texas. I mean, Rick Perry in a good week accomplished more than she has in her history. And now has, I think, the head of the largest corporation in the world. But think about it from the left standpoint. He actually negotiated successfully. In the spirit of Clinton and Kerry, how can you have somebody who's successful?
All right. So you think, just real quick, and we got a break, and then I want you to describe Trumpism. You think, are you confident that everything that I outlined in my opening monologue will happen? Will he get that done?
I think he probably won't. I think the crisis will come 90 days from now when they realize, when it finally hits them, that Washington is that hostile, that difficult, that entrenched, and the swamp ain't going to go away easily. No. And at that moment, I'm hoping he brings that team of winners together, and they collectively decide, you know what? We're going to win again, and then it'll start rolling.
Then things will move. All right, we'll take a break. What is Trumpism? Newt Gingrich defines that when we come back. Now, yesterday he gave a speech to the Heritage Foundation on these principles. We'll get to that and later tonight.
My administration will be focused on three very important words: jobs, jobs, jobs.
Donald Trump, he's promised you, the American people, he will create jobs, especially those of you in poverty on food stamps. Anthony Scaramucci, Austin Goolsbee, they're on later tonight. And my big announcement, I am the executive producer of a movie to come out early next year. Straight ahead.